Otaniqua Mountains. And so I'll first describe the climate and the weather. The mountains really stand as a division between the Long Kloof and the town and the shoreline, because when more moister climates and heavier rainfall come in from the shore, from the ocean, the mountain kind of acts as like a wall or a fence, and it kind of blocks it. And so one side of the mountain, so it makes the entire mountain actually very heavy and dense with different sorts of plants and trees. And then the other side of the mountain, the Long Kloof side, it ends up being very desert-like because the clouds pretty much stop where the mountain comes into place. And it makes the different weather on each side very different, desert-like on the Long Kloof side, and then very humid on the other. And it's, does anyone remember where the mountain is mentioned in Phyla's Child at all? Just any part you remember the mountain identified?
The first part,
What first part?
when they first came to the thing, or when they first came to Phyla, didn't they talk about how like a baby couldn't climb the mountain or whatever, go over
Are
it?
they talking about the baby in the mountain? Anything else?
Also, like when they took them, they had to go over the mountains to go back to the village.
Yeah. And there were actually, the first pass that was constructed to go over the mountain was called the Cradock Pass, which was constructed by the Dutch. And some people thought it was a very smart move, and some people thought it was very stupid, because it was actually created by the elephants that used to live in the mountains. And so it was clever to the point where the elephants knew where and where not to go, but it also was stupid to the point where humans found it very hard to climb it. It's like elephants would be able to climb it easier than they were. And so it also was called the Devil's Cup, and it was considered so dangerous that only monkeys could climb it. And so very few people would actually dare go on that pass. And actually, on page 110, it mentions on how Selling was a convict. Do you guys know what he was doing as a convict when he was convicted?
Building the Russell Brim.
Yeah, he was building another pass. There was a second pass created just a few decades later, and it was called the Montague Pass, and it was constructed by convict labor in 1844. And this was actually the pass that Snelling was working on when he was a convict. And that was named after the prince and everything. It was Prince Montague. And so it's actually mentioned on page 110, and it would end on page 110. Phyla is asking where her husband is, and he says, yes, he's behind the mountain where they were working on the pass. According to what I heard, is one of the gangs working on the port. And so it later goes on to tell her about how she traveled up this mountain with a baby on her back to go see Selling, which I thought was extremely dangerous, especially with a baby on your back, let alone a woman climbing such a hazardous pass. And half the time she couldn't even actually use the pass. She had to go through like dense forests and all that. And so this new pass was sort of a blessing and a curse, because it created a shortcut, and it was much safer to use, even though you usually had to ride by wagon because it was sort of dangerous on foot. But it was a shortcut for goods to come in from the town, and it increased their standard of living. But it also meant that the magistrate had more power over them, and that they could send people, like the two men, who wanted to collect the census. And so, which leads me to one of my other questions for you guys. So, to what extent was it an advantage or a disadvantage to the people of the Long Kloof for the new pass to be built?
It would have been easier travel for them to get across instead of taking the elephant.
If they ever needed to get to the town or to the ports, get goods or whatever.
I think it could also, like, it helps with the travel to get more money with trade and stuff. It's
Get
easier
more
to
money,
trade.
yeah, especially with selling like those ostrich feathers, and because that's how they make their living, right? Anyone else? Does anyone think they should have just been left alone, and that the pass should have been left as it is? So, the mountain is also mentioned, you know, when Phyla said that the child could have never have climbed the mountain. But there's a point on page 166 where Phyla directly asks Selling what he thinks about the child crossing over the pass, and it says, "What do you want to ask, Fiala? Do you believe that the child of 3 could have wandered here from the forest? Do you believe it before God?" Selling dropped the rock rabbit on his lap and looked away to the valley below for a long time. He turned his eyes back to her. "No, Fiala, I don't believe this, but I told you I want a complete answer, not one with a but coming up behind. Then my answer is no, not a child of 3, unless Selling, no, Fiala, not a child of 3. So why do you think Selling was so hesitant to tell her with like the but and the until and stuff like that, to tell her that the child couldn't have crossed the mountain? Because it sounds pretty dangerous and pretty hazardous for even an adult to cross. So why do you think he was still very hesitant about it?
I think he didn't want to tell her what she wanted to hear because he was afraid of what she might do. Because what she does, she goes across the mountain. So I think he was trying to avoid her reaction that way.
He was trying to protect her. But he still did end up saying that he didn't think that the child could cross the mountain. So any other thoughts on that?
I think there's like always that like possibility, and it's like if it couldn't have, then where the heck could this kid have come from, you know? And so he just didn't know, you know, like for certain himself that even.
Yeah, it's one of the great mysteries how that kid got over the mountain, because obviously he wasn't from one of the white families that were in the Long Pool, so someone has to physically brought him over the mountain, which would have been very dangerous back then, even with the hospitals. And why they would want to give him to a black person is also very mystery. So the Otaniqua Mountains divide different climates of the Long Poop and the forest physically, but do you think they divide anything like symbolically, or they divide anything else between the people of the Long Poop and the forest and town people?
I think culture would be one of them, as gone over on the presentation on Thursday, and how continually throughout the book we notice that the culture is drastically different between the physical regions on one side of the mountain compared to the other.
So it symbolically divides it as like a cultural thing?
It kind of has to, because like you can't do certain jobs on the other side that you can do on the side that you're on. So like you have to like have those jobs and those culture things because of what the mountain is and
You know, what their physical resources are.
Yeah.
Do you think it also divided it by like race or even like the family itself, like Phyla's family? Well, when I looked at it, I also thought it was sort of symbolic of the division between their family, because when they took him away, he was across an entire mountain, which is huge back then. And Phyla repeatedly said that he wouldn't be happy in the forest, and that crossing it was too difficult for him, and she wanted to come with him. So I definitely think it really divided their family, and when he came back to the Long Poop and crossed over that mountain, I think that was a real symbolic hurdle that he had to cross to be reunited with his family.